Never count your friends out loud when you're alone in the dark, because something might be listening. 7 friends sat around a dying campfire deep in the woods, laughing to hide their fear of the strange silence around them. One of them joked and said, "Let's count so no one gets lost." They pointed till the last number, 8. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. They laughed, thinking someone counted twice, until they counted again. Still 8. Slowly, they turned to look at each other. 7 faces stared back, but behind them, footprints circled the fire. 8 sets, fresh in the dirt. The next morning, rescuers found the campsite. 7 backpacks, 7 sets of tracks leaving. But around the ashes, 8 sets of footprints were still standing there, facing inward. If you were there, would you dare count again? Don't ever walk your dog alone at night, especially if it suddenly goes quiet. Marco walks with his dog, Bruno, along the empty road near the trees. Bruno suddenly stopped, staring into the darkness. Then Marco heard it, slow clapping. From between the trees, a pale clown stepped out, smiling too wide. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. Marco froze. Bruno growled, then whimpered. In a blink, the clown lunged forward, dragging Bruno screaming into the forest. Marco ran. He never went back, but days later, neighbors said they saw Marco walking at night again. Only now he's the one smiling, standing beside the trees, holding a leash that leads into the darkness. If you heard your dog growling at something you can't see, would you stay or would you run? Did you know the urban legends dancing lady that shows when you're alone at night? Marco once saw a woman spinning under a flickering streetlight, her head twitching to a silent rhythm. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. He laughed, thinking it was just someone drunk, until she stopped mid-spin and slowly pointed straight at him. Neighbors later said he was seen dancing with her in the empty road, smiling, stiff, and silent. By morning, the street was empty, except for a new figure spinning under the light. So tell me, what would you do if you saw her? In Japan, if you see an old man cleaning at midnight, it's too late. They say in an old Japanese school, a janitor once died while locking up the halls, still clutching his keys. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. Years later, a student stayed late to clean his classroom. As he mopped the floor, he heard keys jingling. Then a raspy voice whispered his name from the dark hallway. After he heard the voice, he remembered the warning, never respond. But the voice sounded exactly like his mother. "Come here," it said softly. He stepped outside only to see a hunched janitor standing at the end of the corridor, face hidden, keys shaking in his hand. The next morning, the classroom floor was spotless. The student was gone. Only a new set of rusty keys hung inside the janitor's closet. If you heard someone cleaning tonight, would you follow? Don't ever do this when you're alone, especially in the forest at night. A man ignored that warning. He walked a narrow forest trail after hearing a faint tapping sound, metal hitting wood, over and over. He thought it was just someone chopping trees, until he saw it. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. A tall figure with a rabbit's head, standing upright, holding an axe, dripping something dark. It wasn't chopping trees, it was carving marks into them, tallies. The man ran, but the tapping didn't chase him. It followed, slowly, calmly, like it knew he couldn't escape. Days later, search teams found him alive. No wounds, no blood, just one thing, a fresh carved tally mark deep in his back. So tell me, can you walk into the forest alone? Never get into a taxi when you're alone, if you didn't call it. After the tsunami, a man waved down a silent cab on an empty road. As he sat inside, cold water began soaking his feet. "Did someone ride here before me?" he asked. The driver whispered, "She still is." The man slowly turned. A ghostly girl sat beside him, dripping seawater, staring without blinking. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. Then the driver added quietly, "Strange, she only appears to people who drowned." The man froze, because he suddenly remembered he never survived the tsunami. If you're alone at night, how do you know you're really alive? Did you know the urban legend in Japan called Akamanto, a spirit that gives you a choices, red paper or blue paper? Mika stayed late at school and entered the last stall of a silent bathroom. As she reached for tissue, a whisper slid under the door. Red paper or blue paper. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. Thinking it was a prank, she laughed and chose red. The stall door burst open, and behind it stood Akamanto, smiling beneath a crimson mask. The next morning, the janitor found the stall spotless, except for a single red ribbon hanging from the hook. If you hear a question when you're alone, will you be brave enough to stay silent, or will curiosity answer for you? Never rent a clown when you're home alone. Marco ordered a rental clown online for a prank video. The clown arrived late at night, silent, smiling too wide. Marco laughed at first, until the clown refused to leave. It just stood in the corner, watching. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. Marco heard something strange. Children laughing inside his house. But Marco lived alone. He checked the hallway and found muddy, tiny footprints leading to his bedroom closet. When he opened it, the clown was gone. Inside the closet wall, scratched deep into the wood, were dozens of small handprints and one message: "We came with him." The next morning, Marco's house was empty. Door wide open, phone still recording. The last frame showed the clown staring into the camera, slowly raising one finger to its lips. So tell me, do you still like clown? Never ever answer a whisper that calls your name when you're alone at night. Marco heard his name whispered from under his pillow, right after he placed his fallen tooth there. He thought it was the tooth fairy, but the whisper didn't sound gentle. It sounded hungry. But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. After he heard the hungry whisper, he lifted the pillow. The tooth was gone, replaced by a tiny, wet fingerprint and a note scratched in crooked letters: "I don't collect teeth, I collect the ones they came from." That night, Marco's parents woke to the sound of chewing, slow, wet, right beside his bed. In the morning, Marco was still there, smiling, but every single tooth in his mouth was missing. And sometimes, late at night, if you listen closely, you can still hear him whispering under children's pillows, "Can I have yours next?" So tell me, if you lost a tooth tonight and heard breathing under your pillow, would you still check? Don't ever buy a Labubu in an old toy shop. Marco was home past midnight, scrolling on his phone, when he heard it, a soft, playful whisper from behind his door. It sounded like a child, giggling, calling his name in a sing-song tone. "Marco, open! I found you!" But before we continue, can you leave a like and subscribe if you believe that God can save you from every bad spirit? Thank you so much. Let's continue. After he heard Doll whispered, he laughed nervously, thinking it was just his imagination. But then he noticed something strange. His bedroom door handle was slowly turning from the inside. When he finally forced himself to look, he saw it. A small, smiling, toy-like creature sitting on his chair, head tilted, eyes too wide, teeth too sharp. It whispered again, "You looked at me first." The next morning, Marco's family found his room empty, except for one thing sitting on his bed, a new doll with Marco's exact smile. If you ever hear something calling you when you're alone, will you ignore it or will you look and let it notice you back? Don't ever enter an abandoned chapel when you're alone. Jude ignored that warning. One night he stepped into a crumbling chapel at the edge of town, its doors already open, as if waiting. Inside, a nun stood at the altar, head bowed, unmoving. He called out. She didn't respond, so he walked closer and closer until she slowly turned around. There was no face under the veil, only darkness. And from inside, it came his own voice, begging, "Please, don't come in." Later, they found the chapel locked from the outside, and the traveler standing at the altar, wearing a nun's veil. If you hear your own voice warning you from the dark, would you listen? Never sit on an old couch you find abandoned when you're alone, because some things aren't thrown away, they're left waiting. Arvind thought it was a lucky find. The couch sat beside an empty road, strangely clean, its cushions full and inviting. He chuckled, dragged it into his apartment, and dropped onto it after a long day. It felt perfect, too perfect, warm, like someone had just stood up. Then he noticed the smell, not dust, not mold, but something faintly sweet and rotten. That night, while half asleep on the couch, he felt it sink beside him, slowly, like someone else had just sat down. He froze. The fabric creaked near his ear. Then a whisper came from inside the cushion. Not beside him, not behind him, under him. Finally, someone to replace me. The next morning, the couch was back where he found it, sitting quietly by the roadside, clean, soft, waiting. But if you look closely at the stitching, you could see something pressed inside, a man's face, still breathing. So tell me, if you ever saw a perfect old couch sitting alone, would you sit down to rest? Or would you wonder how many people are still trapped inside, waiting for someone to take their place? Never answer a voice that calls your name when you're alone, no matter how familiar it sounds. One night he stayed up late in his small apartment, scrolling on his phone while the city outside went quiet. Then he heard it. Mark, soft, close, from inside the room. He froze, thinking it was just his imagination. But then it came again, clearer this time. His mother's voice, the same gentle tone she used when he was a child. Mark, come here. His heart pounded. His mother lived miles away. He slowly stood, following the sound toward his dark hallway. With each step, the air felt colder, heavier, like the silence was watching him. The voice led him to the bathroom door. It was slightly open. Mark, it whispered again, now trembling, almost desperate. He pushed the door open. The bathroom was empty. Then the whisper came from behind him, right beside his ear. You weren't supposed to turn around. The next morning, neighbors reported hearing Mark talking all night, answering someone. But when police checked his apartment, they found him alone, standing in the hallway, facing the wall, still whispering back. Never try this alone, especially if the elevator stops on a floor that doesn't exist. Daniel, a quiet night guard who loved testing urban legends. One rainy night, bored and curious, he stepped into the old building's elevator and pressed the exact sequence he found online. The doors closed. Floor 2, 5, 1, 7. Each stop felt colder than the last. The lights flickered. When the elevator finally reached the last number, the doors opened to a silent hallway that wasn't part of the building. No lights, no sound, just darkness. And a woman standing at the end of the hall facing away. Daniel remembered the rule. Do not speak to her. Do not look back. His hands shook as he slammed the close door button. The doors shut, but just before they sealed, the woman's voice whispered from right beside his ear. Daniel, why did you come back again? The elevator returned to the lobby. The next morning, security cameras showed something impossible. Daniel never entered the building that night, so if an elevator ever opens to a floor that shouldn't exist, never try to balance a chair on 2 legs when you're alone in a rental house, especially if it starts moving on its own. Leo, a young man who moved into a cheap rental at the end of a quiet street. The house felt normal at first, just old with creaky floors and one wooden chair left behind in the corner of the living room. One night, bored and scrolling through urban legends, Leo read about a game. Balance a chair on 2 legs at midnight, stare at it, and wait. Something unseen will sit with you. He laughed and tried it. The chair tilted, wobbled, then slowly steadied. Leo smiled until it leaned back further, as if someone heavy had just settled into it. Then he heard a soft whisper behind him. Why are you looking at my seat? The next morning, the landlord unlocked the door after complaints of noise. Inside, the chair stood perfectly balanced, and Leo was sitting in it. Still,